community cannot feed for long on itself. It can only flourish where always the boundaries are giving way to the coming of others from beyond them, unknown and undiscovered brothers. Welcome to the Thurman Conversations for 2021. Moving into our second year, we will take the first couple of months exploring the intersection of faith, food, and justice, and how we can address food insecurity and other inequalities as we work towards racial justice. Our first conversation of this new year is with Sue Salinger. Sue is the executive director of Ekar Farm in Denver. Ekar Farm is part of the Jewish Community Farming Network, building community resilience and food equity by connecting people to each other and the earth. We will explore how our theology impacts our transformation, how we can bring justice to our neighborhoods through how we feed people, and what Christians can learn from the vibrant Jewish farming movement, and what we can do to take the church past the idea of food pantries and meal ministries. Sue has used Jewish wisdom tradition to create transformation for communities for decades and reminds us that the only way to get it together is together. We will continue with our format from the first year. Sue and I will talk for about 40 minutes. During that time, you will be muted, but we invite you to add questions in the chat. We will gather the questions for the last 20 minutes and give Sue a chance to answer them as many as time allows. So if anything comes up, just put it in the chat. A special thank you to our mission partners, the Race Task Force for the Episcopal Church in Colorado and St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Lakewood. Our show is produced by Michelle Auerbach. My name is Alan Cole, and I'm honored to host our conversation with Sue tonight. Sue, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you all.
I'm glad you could show up. Thanks for being our first guest of 2021.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! The work of Ekar Farm is truly amazing. Give us a sense of the farm and the history of the Jewish farming movement in the 20th century, and feel free to give us all the historical context you want to give us.
Okay, stop me at any point. Ekar Farm is we're in our 11th year. We're a 2-acre farm on the site of a Jewish day school, Denver Academy of Torah. We're not affiliated with them. We rent from them, but a woman who worked for them went to a food conference, a Jewish food conference quite a while ago, got very excited, came back and said to her staff and her supervisors that the thing to do would be to grow food on the extra space that they had. They had 5 acres. So ever since then, Ekar has been operating as a small operation, no more than 3 staff. And we grow, this last year, due to COVID, we grew more. We grew 22,000 pounds of food. We partner with food pantries in the area and Same Cafe, a pay-as-you-go cafeteria. We have over 6,200 people came through the farm, mostly virtual this last year. But on a usual year, 4,000 to 5,000 students and volunteers come through and have a chance to connect to the earth, see how things grow, take classes, all within a spiritual context of preserving the planet. And to answer the question about the Jewish farming movement, it starts a long time ago, 4,000 years ago, with a Canaanite tribe moving out of a hill into the Mesopotamian area where people were farming with canals. Zip forward, we could talk more about that later. So in a certain sense, all of us in the Judeo-Christian and Muslim traditions, our roots are in farming. We are the first each of us are the first agriculturists, or at least that's in our background. In the 20th century, in Europe, just at the turn of the 20th century, there was a idealistic movement, utopian movement of people from European villages to go back to the land and start farms. Some of those people moved to what was then Palestine, and some came to America. And that picked up as the pressure, anti-Semitism against Jews got worse, more people moved out. Baron von Hirsch started an organization which is now HIAS, the Hebrew Immigration Assistance Organization. That organization put 40 Jewish farms in towns across America. What the Baron thought was that it would be great if we could put people in a setting where they could maintain their spiritual tradition, much like the Amish came to the Midwest, and have an economy. So none of those have lasted more than 20 years. We had one in Colorado Springs that lasted 2 years because it's very difficult to farm here in Colorado, or challenging. Um, Zipping forward to the 70s and 80s, there was a 60s and 70s, there was a back to the land movement. Ben and Jerry's ice cream, Stonyfield yogurt, a couple of other companies were founded by Jewish kids who bought into that overall culture change, culture shift about getting back to the land. And then in the 90s is where we kind of trace our contemporary Jewish farming movement from. There were a few people on the East Coast who rented space at what was um, an old summer camp for garment workers in New York called Isabella Friedman. So it had been a place where workers had come up to cool off, go back to work. By the time the 80s hit, it was a camp for seniors, and it wasn't doing that well. And two outward bound educate leaders moved out there and said, "We're going to do outward bound for Jewish kids. We're going to find Jews who are young Jews who aren't really connected to the tradition, who aren't really Congregationalists, and we're going to put them out for a transformational experience in nature." And they used a farm to do that. So through a 3-month immersive program for years and years, for decades now, young adults have been going to that program and turning into farmers. So many programs have come out of that. The keynote program, the key program for Isabella Friedman was Adamah, which means the earth. And then they branched off. One of the partners left to the West Coast outside of Berkeley and formed Urban Adamah. So the same kind of programs, working in food justice, growing food, making it available to local people, training, giving people a spiritual experience who had really never had one on the earth. There was also a program at Isabella Friedman called Teva, which was it was really a training ground for college kids to come and lead outdoor farm-based education for Jewish 5th and 6th graders on the East Coast, along the East Coast. So the counselors from that program Teva and the alum from the Adamah and Urban Adamah have some enormous percentage of them have started out Jewish farms and Jewish farm businesses and Jewish farm educational programs. And now we have a Jewish farm network that has over 2,000 Jewish farmers identified, mostly young. So it's popping.
Wow. So do me a favor as you move forward, because I'm totally interested in this. Whenever you use a Hebrew word, and I hope you use as many as you want to, stop and tell us what it means and in the context. And then, because you did a great job on Adamah, I want you to go back a little further, not further, but go back to 4,000 years ago and talk about what it was, to give us some history of the Israelites escaping Egypt. Talk to us about the just society.
Sure. So what makes farming Jewish is maybe the answer to maybe the question for that answer. How can we still use that today? So in the Torah portion, that's the first 5 books of Moses. In the Old Testament, we have which is coming up pretty soon. We have a famine that happens, and families, not just the families in the Bible, but presumably many families, had to deal with a famine. And what it says in the text, and what Egyptian archaeological records support, is that first people came in, and the text says this. The first year of a famine, people came and gave their money to the Pharaoh, to Joseph, and said, we're having a famine. Oh, let me go back just a tiny bit more. Why was there a famine? So there's a famine because the canal-based system of agriculture had grown so quickly that they extracted too much, never ceasing building, too much progress, and the land got oversalinated. So the land got very salty, and crops couldn't, first there was barley, then there was wheat, then they had to go back to barley, and pretty soon it was less than a third of the crop could grow. And the civilization began to crumble. So the famine was because of poor agricultural practices, unsustainable agricultural practices that used too many resources. So because of that famine that was caused by poor farming practices or non-sustainable farming practices, the first year people they gave up their money. They said, hey, um, we need to eat, take our money, give us seeds to plant for the year. The next year they came back. The text says they came back. It was still a famine, and they said, "Here, take our lands. We'll give you our lands. Just let us grow food so we can make it." Third year of the famine, people came back and said, "We can't even grow enough to eat anymore. So take us as indentured servants. Take us and put us to work and let." So in our tradition, in our shared tradition, in a certain way of looking at the text, unsustainable agricultural practices lead directly to slavery. So at the time that the text tells us as the story tells us that the people got out of Egypt and were beginning their new society, rebooting their society, they also had to reboot farming. So we have in Leviticus, we've got in Numbers, we've got this list of what do you have to do. So the first thing you have to do is you have to take a Sabbath. You have to rest. You've got to take a day a week and this is to set up a sustainable agricultural society where there's no slavery. So to keep out of slavery, you have to take a rest. You have to leave the corners of your fields for the widow, orphan, and the stranger, for the dispossessed, people that don't have any access to land. And the Jewish thinking on that is it's not your land, it's God's land. So you're just on it for a little while. So give those portions of it to the people that need it. And then it says you have to take a sabbatical year. You have to take a Shemitah or release year every 7 years. What do you do in those 7 years? The land has to rest too. In that seventh year. So in that seventh year, anyone, including animals, have the right to go. You can't work the field, but you can take from whatever's growing there. So farming, good agricultural practices could give us a society where there's not slavery, where there's not hunger. And every seventh year there was debt release as well. So if you had debt, your debt was forgiven. If you were in servitude, you were freed. So so many of our contemporary issues are sort of embedded in this ancient agricultural setup of Shemitah or release, sabbatical year. So issues of debt and economy, issues of servitude, issues of access to food, issues of environmental protection, environmental sustainability. It's kind of great.
That's awesome. So I want to know a little bit about the notion of connecting people to nature, how and what's going on within Judaism, and why nature mattered.
So we have to have for Judaism, it's the same as for everything on the planet. We have to have a planet we can live on. Judaism particularly says, there's our sages teach us, don't destroy it. If you destroy it, there's no one coming after you to fix it. Um, Nature matters most of all because it's God's creation. It's a creation. It's part of everything that is. Everything equally shares a bit of divine resonance, or divinity. So for Jews, nature is important. We're obligated to protect and keep it. It's not about the dominion part. It's really about the dominion. Maybe is a bad translation for taking care of. So taking care of nature. I mean, you could also say, what is our utopian vision? Our utopian vision is an Edenic one, where everything you need is already right there. Everything that we need is there. The other thing I'll say is that, just to think about the blessings and liturgy that we have, that tie back to nature. If you actually said blessings over your food every time you ate, we have many blessings over food, different blessing for bread than we do for something that grows from a tree or something that grows from the ground. If you actually, so your the lineage or the history or um, the background or the practices, or the sun and the seasons are all tied into, and are all come to mind when you say thanks, source of life, for creating the world in such a way that food grows from the trees. So if you actually said that, and knew and knew the English words for it, and didn't just say it in Hebrew or in a language that wasn't vernacular, you'd be tied into nature every time, all the time. You couldn't really destroy the earth if food comes from the earth.
So how has tell me how this movement has in the a better understanding and connection of our connection to nature. How has that changed the nature of the synagogue um, recently, and who that connection has brought back in for you?
So we really wish it really impacted the synagogues, because, like the churches, it's hard to get young people to go into the building that was built for a different time, for a different notion of divinity and notion of what our relationship to the divine is. At least in the immense suburban Jewish synagogues that I grew up with in the Detroit area, it's really epic. It's 1,000 person seating, and they're way the clergy are way down there, and your role is the audience. So the role of nature for synagogues and for Jewish engagement now is it's the same for us as it is for the Christian farming movement, and really for so many people that are, on the one hand, too much green culture like what we have right here. I try to have plants and pictures of plants, but we need to be outside. We know through science that when we're outside, different kind of things happen neurologically, so that we're happier. If you're barefoot or farming with your hands, you're actually increasing the amount of microbes in you that help your serotonin and dopamine uptake and creation. You're happier outside. So when we try to incorporate nature into what we're doing, there's been so many ways that people are using it. So on the one hand, there's always been summer camps. There's still summer camps. On the other hand, congregations now are really taking a look at how are we using our land. We've got access to land. We could be putting in a food forest. We could be putting in trees to create cooling zones, because as we know that it's going to get hotter and hotter, and we'll need spaces where our congregations are located. I mean, what's the role of a congregation really to our neighbors? Congregations are putting in gardens and growing food and working that into the curriculum, so that if you have 4 or 5 years worth of a community garden going, or you put in an orchard. If a third grade class puts in an apple tree, by the time they're 3 years later, 4 years later, and then when they're older and they have their own kids, they come. I mean, so we're looking at all kinds of ways to both change synagogue culture. We have a program called Seal of Sustainability. We've got 13 congregations in the Denver area, 70 across the country, who are pledging to take on issues of sustainability. So whether they're doing a food policy to say we're only going to buy fair food, we're going to buy local food, we're not going to have too much sugar. We're not going to use styrofoam or paper products. We're going to take care of our waste stream and compost, which is hard for congregations because, you can't compost through the municipal system. So we're looking to really try to make it part of what it means to be a person of faith. Necessarily means that we're protecting the planet. And what we found is that for young people, it's a big draw. There's people who won't go into buildings, will come and attend a service and attend a holiday celebration and learn more by being outside. So it's been pretty useful to bring people and engage people back in. And it's also, we've got strength in numbers. How do we make change? We can each make change on what we're going to eat or what we're going to use. But congregations can make a change for a lot of people as an institution. Enough of our institutions, if they're working to make this change, at some point there's a tipping point, and the whole city is different. And so we're sort of looking at how do we take these Jewish farming projects and use them as a hub to gather people. It's a really easy draw to say to a congregation, bring your kids over to us, we'll take them for the day. We'll do that, we'll do this program for you. So in a certain way, we relieve some of their staff and programming burdens. And once they're in, we can say, if you'd like to do it again, we'd like you to please do an evaluation of your electricity usage or your paper usage or where you source your food. So it is a movement for change.
And it also sounds like it's relevant. I know at our own church, our food ministry and just folks seeing us feed people and have food distributions, they're like, okay, that church is doing something that the world actually needs. Because I don't know if it's the same way in Judaism now, but a lot of Christians don't think churches are relevant.
Right.
Don't go in for the very same reasons you said a minute ago. Why would you go into a place that's irrelevant? And anyway, so tell us if what has COVID done to the farm, and how have you had to adapt?
COVID's been stunning, as it's been for everybody. We had a big shift this year. Uh, we usually by this time of the year, the entire year is programmed out. We have 400 events booked. So last year in March, we had to cancel everything, and we suddenly discovered we were essential workers. We're farming, we're growing food. So we grow food for Jewish Family Services Food Pantry, Kavod Senior Life, residents run food pantry in Cherry Creek, Same Cafe, which is a pay-as-you-can restaurant. I just encourage all of you to go eat there. And they serve primarily the unhoused. They're on Colfax in the Capitol Hill area, and Metro Caring. And then we also provide seeds to, I don't know, over 1,000 gardeners and community gardeners around town. So when COVID hit, we didn't know if we could meet on the farm, and we're also powered by volunteers. So if we have 1,000 volunteers on the farm every year and we can't have any of them because of COVID, like what are we going to do? And then in addition to that, the amount of hunger grew so quickly, the amount of need grew so quickly. So we were in March, we began to attend these weekly meetings with hunger relief coalitions. The city has one, the state has one. And as part of being on those calls, we were able to funnel into Ekar quite a lot of emergency cash to be able to. We expanded from an acre to 2 acres in what we were growing. So the year before we grew a couple thousand pounds. This year we grew 22,000 pounds. So it's kind of scaled up in the same way that to meet the need that's scaled up. There's 10 times more hunger than there has been. 1 in 3 of us in Denver are food insecure now because of COVID. So we had to really roll with it. We also started online programs and have reached way more people than we would have ever reached before, but we're not able to have the same kind of transformative experiences, online. I don't know how we really reach people in the same way as when you're putting your hands in the ground, taking some food out of it.
So we've noticed the same thing at our church, and we've had to increase the number of distributions we have. We don't have inside meals. Now they're in a parking lot and we're just giving boxes to folks, and it's just crazy now. You mentioned a partnership a minute ago. Tell us about what other partnerships with organizations have been most life-giving for you guys.
It's been so amazing to be part. So when COVID hit, we got a call from a former Occupy Wall Street organizer, Nate Kleinman. He runs the Experimental Farm Network. He's a seed grower. He's trying to grow perennial crops that grow in different bioregions across the country. He sent out a list announcement to his old listserv from Occupy, which I was still on after all this time. And he said, we're trying to start a cooperative garden coalition. We think people need to grow food in order to be food sovereign. In order for there to be food security, every city's got to have people on the ground growing food. The food banks aren't going to be able to meet the need, which actually didn't turn out to be true. There's plenty of food in the system. But everything we can do to lessen the demand on the system is a good thing. So when he called us and we became the Rocky Mountain distribution hub for seeds, we were able to partner with over 30 organizations all over town that have community gardens. So we, on the one hand, partnered with Denver Urban Gardens and Grow Local and Big Green, other organizations that serve community gardeners and have community gardens. But there's many communities and neighborhoods that need assistance with that. So Montbello Organizing Committee is one group that just is so beautiful. They are putting up a new building, and they have a children's farm, and they have 9 school gardens and a walkway that they're building in between it. And to be able to go and work with this mostly Black and Hispanic community, to be able to find out what kind of foods these people would like to grow, what they wanted to eat, make sure those seeds and those plants were available. It was really lovely. They grew over 10,000, they grew and donated over 10,000 pounds of food last year to their food bank. We partnered with Kaizen Food Rescue. Thai Nguyen is a Vietnamese immigrant, and she was sort of a kind of a garage distributor in her neighborhood, and now she's got 5 sites a week where she's distributing to I don't know 1,500 people at each site twice a week. It's incredible how much need there is. So to see that regular people step up in times like these and just try to take care of things, it put together with this coalition of philanthropists, city departments, school departments, just people that came together week after week through the organizational fatigue of the COVID that's still going on, to try to make sure that they could immediately fill all the holes. It's been really beautiful to see it.
Wow. I would say the same thing about the volunteers that have just popped out of everywhere to help us do distribution as well. It's kind of, I mean, it's if you go to one of those things, it'll kind of shake you up a little bit just to see the number of people who really care, you know? Um, what about other faith-based organizations?
So so this Jewish farming movement started as a Jewish food movement, and I just want to call out Reverend Nuria Parrish in Michigan at Plainsong Farm on the west coast of Michigan. She heard the head of Chazon, that means vision. That's the largest organization, Jewish environmental organization. She went to one of his speeches, and he threw the gauntlet down and said, "Look, if I Google, this is 4 years ago, if I Google Jewish food movement, I have 50,000, hits come up. But if I Google Christian food movement, 0." So he said, I challenge everyone in this audience to start these projects. And she did. And so she has an incredible ministry where she is growing different kinds of grain that are being used for ritual products. And she does all the same work that we do. It's really cool. Here in town, there's the table has a farm and does services outdoors, is not Jewish. There's a Jewish farm in Colorado Springs called Ahava Farms. Ahava means love. And this is a guy who has 650 CSA shares that he brings up to Denver every week. CSAs are customer supported agriculture. So you pre-buy for the year. So you're paying the farmer $500 for 20 weeks of groceries, and you're sharing the risk and the harvest with them. So he's been doing that. But there's just not as many as you'd think. We need more. We need more. It can start in a church, ground.
We have a huge parking lot. We could turn part of that into a garden.
Well, part of the problem is that land here is expensive, and some congregations have a lot of space. Jewish congregations in the south of Denver have a ton of space, and we're trying to figure out how to turn those into parks, cooling centers, food, perennial food forests. But I don't know what the situation is. As we get closer into the city, there's less and less land available. So that seems to be the limiting factor for most folks.
So, is it Michelle, producer Michelle? Can we? Is there a website for Same Cafe?
Yeah, I'll drop it into the chat. And I also want to say that the next person we have coming to talk to us in 2 weeks is Elizabeth from Honore Farms in Northern California, and she was also inspired by a very similar story, and she's doing grain growing for churches all over the country who want to be using grain to bake communion bread, and they actually serve a lot of synagogues in Marin County too, to provide bread for people to make, challah and stuff. And so we actually, at least one of the bright lights in that we get to talk to next time.
Oh, that's great.
So, what about frontline farming?
So frontline farming is an amazing, amazing operation. I know you'll be speaking to them. I'm hoping you'll be speaking to them soon. Damien and Fatima are professors at Regis, and they run the food. I don't really know the actual title of their institute at Regis. It's a food justice institute, and they also run a farm. It's black and brown run, and as one of the few black run farms in Denver, they are just leaders in social justice. I mean, we're about to take, at the end of the month, we have the Mile High Farmers has a meeting, and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which we're on with them, that's run by Frontline, they're going to be putting on an amazing, amazing training for all growers in town on really all the basics of racial justice. I mean, every issue that we come up against really plays out on black and brown bodies more than it does on ours. So the work that they're doing is really top notch and incredible.
So, we have Damien and Fatima next month, actually. So we'll get to talk to them. I hope you join us for that one. Can you?
I will. I'm a fan.
So how could the CSA movement help us create a more food justice oriented society?
Well, when you talk about the food system, there's inequity in every aspect of it.
Let me interrupt. Tell us about what a CSA is.
A CSA is customer supported agriculture. It's sort of like a co-op where you pre-buy, you give the farmer the money at the beginning of the year in exchange for a share of whatever's growing that week. So it means that the farmer doesn't have to go to a bank and borrow money for the year. And it means that you're sharing the risks and the benefits. So if there's an awful lot of kale, you get an awful lot of kale. But if there's an awful lot of peaches, you get an awful lot of peaches. But if there's a late hail in Colorado, which happens frequently, you might not get anything for a couple of weeks. And that's just what it is. I think by getting to know your farmer and where your food comes from and supporting local farmers, that's the only kind of food security we can really have. A CSA is one model to do that. But I think that when you think about the food system, there's just a ton of ways to engage with it. It's, the question that we ask about food justice is it good for people and good for the earth when it's growing? Is it good for people and is it good for the earth when it's being harvested? Is it good? So that's labor issues, environmental, how you're treating the planet, what kind of pesticides you might or might not be using. When it's being packaged, when it's being transported, when it's being distributed, is there equal access to high quality food? What we know from distributing a lot of food this year to people is that a lot of the food that comes in isn't high quality food. The vegetables that we're growing on the open market would, people could not pay for them. We have priced out high quality food for most people as a society. So we have to ask those questions at every step of it. So a CSA is one way to keep the money local and to keep, farmers in business and to keep food, nutrient dense food that doesn't have to travel very far to get to you available.
So Michelle mentioned grains a few minutes ago. Do you guys distribute grain?
We do not, because you need more acreage than we have, but there are several exciting farmers in Boulder County and up in Brighton who are growing beautiful organic grains, heritage grains. We grow a tiny stand of it just to show kids and just to demonstrate how you make, how difficult it is actually to make bread, how much you have to partner with nature and creation in order to get food.
So if you were going to give us a nuts and bolts way, not just any of us or any in our communities, how would we get started? I know the Jewish food movement is very old and has been going on a long time, but if a community just wanted to get engaged, how would we do that?
Well, I would get your facilities people to do a little audit and find out what events do you buy food for? And where are you sourcing that food? Are you going to buy from a local farmer? Are you going to buy from have you vetted where you get your food to see if they are treating workers fairly? I mean, it's terrible what's happened during COVID in Colorado to processors and farmers out in Pueblo. I mean, it's just been terrible what's going on. So what are you supporting with the money that you are spending? What are you supporting as a congregation, and does it align with your values? And I'd suggest that across the whole, the whole real gamut. Do you have land outside? If you do, are you watering it? Is it high water use lawn? Is it pesticide lawn? Can you do something else with it? Can you plant food on it? Can you plant insectary plants so that you're supporting bug life? So I would walk around your property and I'd say, hey, what gets about 6 hours sun? And I'd, then it's just putting your shoulder to the work, just getting a shovel out.
So there are a lot of community gardens and backyard farmers in Colorado, especially, well, all over, but up near where we are in Boulder, there's several little small gardens. What would a backyard farmer or a community garden do with any surplus harvest that they have?
So there's a great new organization that's out this year called Fresh Food Connect. Michelle, can you call Fresh Food Connect is it's an app that you download, and you do it by your zip code, and they've arranged for drop-offs or distribution hubs in many zip codes, and so you can just dial it in, and if there isn't and then you just take it over whenever it's ready. There are most places would prefer vegetables and fruits that don't have chemicals on them. So it'd be great to learn other ways to grow food than chemicals with chemicals and pesticides. But if Fresh Food Connect does not have a distribution hub in your zip code, just go to Ample Harvest. AmpleHarvest.org will tell you in your zip code where there's a church-based food pantry right around you.
So
on the other hand, if you wanted to think about it and plan, you could grow among a number of people enough of a product to make another product out of. So that might be something to think about too.
Say something about that.
Yeah, so if you had a number of people growing something, you could perhaps make a product. If you were growing elderberries, you could make, I think a lot about how churches used to do this in Europe. There's a way to have an income stream and grow food or grow a product and make something out of it, a value-added product out of it that you can sell. And I think that seems like, why have we lost that? Why, we can grow apples here. Can't we bottle cider?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I've seen an apple tree where we are.
There are churches that have beer that brew beer, so why not?
Hops.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So what's on y'all's plate next? What will Ekar Farm be doing next?
Well, we've just received a couple of emergency hunger grants, so we will be able to plant out our full 2 acres starting in 2 months. We've just partnered with CSU and the Denver Park System to grow all the starts for all the similar organizations like us. Parks and Rec, because of COVID, the city doesn't have a budget to plant nearly what it does for parks. So I don't know what the parks are going to look like this next year. But in order to stay open, they needed to find a project. So they went to the CSU extension officer in Denver, and he rounded up all of almost all of us who grow food for donation or grow plants for donation to gardeners. And we just ordered all the seeds. They're sitting on my table over there for 6 organizations. We're going to take them over to Denver Parks and Rec, and they are going to start everyone's seeds. And we're also planning our events for this year. We do have 13 congregations that we're working with to try to support their gardens and tree planting on their sites. And then we have, when COVID ends, we'll be doing programming. Feel free to come and volunteer at Ekar Farm. It's fun. Come on out, use the space.
So you mentioned you have about 1,000 volunteers a year. Is that right?
Yeah. It's traditionally corporate volunteers.
Okay.
I did not build it. I inherited it. So there are a couple of volunteer aggregators. Planet Helping is one of them, and they are intermediaries between big corporations and organizations that need volunteers, and they send us a ton of people. And we have just a ton of people anyway. People during this time really want to get outside.
So you mentioned, I don't know that I could overstate the spiritual transformation that's happened in our community, just in our service of other people. I mean, it's changed us as much as it's changed anybody we've served, I think. But you mentioned the spiritual side of it a little while ago. Tell me, how has this changed you?
Well, my career was, I did 30 years in radio and television, and as an executive. And when I started to get involved with a spiritual leader in Boulder, who sent me outside to do earth-based work, because Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi of blessed memory said the most important thing we can do right now is protect the planet. If we don't have a planet, we're not going to be here. And as people of faith, it's our job to go do that. So as many people did who were in his orbit, I began studying this and working on earth-based projects. And my entire life took a shift towards service instead of, television.
I want you to say more. Some of the folks in our community are reading a book by Abraham Joshua Heschel, Sabbath.
Yeah.
When you say more about, I mean, you've connected Sabbath to the land. Can you say more about that, and particularly how important it is, not just to the land, but also for us in our relationship to each other and to God?
Well, one thing I'll say is that I'm not an observant Jew. I'm a pretty, at this point in my life, I'm a mystic, but I'm in sort of the prophetic, I guess you'd say, lineage. But I'm not an Orthodox Jew, and so Ekar Farm is on an Orthodox Jewish day school, and so we have to follow the most rigorous of the rules. So we can't be on the site on Shabbat. So if you can't be on a site in Colorado, if it's going to be 100 degrees tomorrow and we don't water the plants, what's going to happen? So the tradition tells us you can't water the plants on Shabbat because Shabbat is not the day for you to the Sabbath is not the day for you to do your work. It's up to God. You have to let God deal with it. And so amazingly, and as much as I was freaked out about that we wouldn't be able to have this food to give to hungry people, it worked out fine. You know what I mean? It's not like we need to control as much as we think we need to control. And something about the pausing on Shabbat and the Shemitah rules, the sabbatical year rules of you just can't consume it all. You have to, it's up to you to limit what you do. You can't have everything and do everything. And so a practice where you have to look at that and say, well, what am I giving up? Giving up. What am I offering up? It's really a shift in how you think about things. If I'm offering up that farm, to the divine every time I leave that farm. You know, if it's Shabbat, it's not up to me to make it work. It's, if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, it'll, you know, the collaboration with the divine is going to make it happen. You know, I don't really know what to say other than that. You know, the trees look dead right now, but very shortly there's going to be flowers on those trees. And just right after that, there's going to be fruit on those trees. And just right after that, there's going to be little kids pressing apples. It's an amazing thing. If you work in the cycle of time and the cycle of the seasons, um, there's an appreciation, and as Heschel talks about wonder, you know, you're in that awe and wonder, and it's just right there in front of you all the time if you just look.
So thanks for saying that, by the way. You know, it's a bunch of spiritual people on this call, and the connection to that for us is important. Have you noticed, or have you noticed at Ekar or any of your partner organizations real changes with the way that climate change is affecting all of us? Have you noticed it in your work?
Well, we see it on the farm for sure. You know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago in Colorado, it used to rain every night in the summer. You know, it would rain in the evening and then get sunny again. And that doesn't happen anymore. It just doesn't happen. We had the hottest year ever this last year, and the hottest year before that was the year before. It was 100 degrees by the time it was 11:30 in the morning, and there were fires everywhere. You couldn't breathe. You couldn't be outside working. So climate change, and Colorado itself has moved at least a half a zone, growing zone, in the last decade. So so it's, you know, different things grow here than used to grow here, and some things that grew here won't grow here now. So that's challenging for everybody. We also heard this year from the water folks at the state that it's a sad story. There's a town in Colorado called Dove, Colorado, on the western slope that used to be, since the 1800s, the potato capital of America. Oh, sorry, the bean capital of America. And the last farmer moved out last year because there's no water. So the farmers in Pueblo right now are really having they have an ancient system of water, how they deal with the water, and there's not enough water. So the water expert this year told us on one of these community calls with the hunger community that it looks like within 5 years there's not going to be an ability to have agriculture in Colorado south of Colorado Springs. And you know, what he didn't say was, well, and sometime after that we won't have any up here if it keeps getting hotter. So for farming in Colorado, the weather's, you know, you can see it. For congregations and the Jewish community, I don't know any, you know, what do you think? I don't think people see it. I think they know that the forests in the mountains are decimated by pine beetles, and I know they know that there's fire every year and something's the matter, but I still don't see that people have said this is something that is actually happening and we need to act on this right now. So I don't know what it will take. We
Well,
can encourage people.
we can encourage people. I think part of, and Michelle and I have talked about this. A lot of us are, economically speaking, are in the zone of it won't affect us right now. But you mentioned it a little while ago. Poor folks, particularly, are most affected by what's going on with the climate, like they're most affected by what's going on with COVID. And I think the thing that's called attention to it for at least our community is beginning to look at the people and the places and how it's affecting those people. Right now. So it's sort of, we've been able to connect it to somebody's lives and livelihood rather than saying it's this climatological thing. So
Yeah.
I had another question. What was I going to ask you? Tell us. I don't think you told us. I know it's on your website. Did we put Ekar Farm up, Michelle?
Ekarfarm.org.
Ekarfarm.org. What does Ekar mean?
Ekar is a Hebrew word that is means something different in biblical Hebrew than it does in contemporary Hebrew. It means the essence of, or the, um, it means like the little DNA, or it means the part of the seed that's just coming out of the seed. So it's the essence of a thing, the most important part of a thing.
And where are you guys located?
We're in Lowry. We're at Monaco. We're just east of Monaco and just north of Alameda.
So I know what I was going to ask you. Thanks for telling us where you are. Have you guys been affected by water shortages or water costs?
Yes. So it's interesting. We're on the, because we're on the back, the back acreage of a undeveloped back acreage of a school. We don't have we have city water, but we don't have electricity. Because we're in the middle of Lowry, it's the old Air Force Base. So the Lowry is controlled. I know this is a backwards answer. Lowry is controlled by an HOA. And the farm doesn't fit into the HOA's design specs. So they don't want us to put any building or infrastructure up for water collection. We have 3 big 300-gallon water square. You've seen those plastic squares that take water off of the roof of a shed. But we can't build any other infrastructure for it because we can't put electricity in. We can't pump that water. So we have put solar in. We have a solar cooler, and if we get enough grant money, we'll put a solar pump in to try to get that water out of those big trucks and into the fields. So we're limited to city water right now, and our water cost in 19, we did farm more this year, but our water cost was $300, and this year it was $800 a month in the summer. So water is, every board meeting we bring it up. It's going to be the limiting factor for us cost wise.
As it is for the rest of Colorado.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got to go back to this thing about your volunteers and how many you have. And I understand that you inherited that, but you have to know, I'm assuming you know of other community gardens or small farms that may need volunteers.
Yes.
Tell us where we can go if somebody wanted to get back in touch with the land.
Sure.
Tell us who we can help.
Well, we would love for you to volunteer at Ekar Farm. So sign up on our volunteer sheet or email us, or go on Facebook and go, I'd love to volunteer with you. We have shifts. What we did because of COVID, because we couldn't have these large groups come out at one time, we have a COVID teams. So every Monday we farm early in the morning. So from about 7 or 8 a.m. until 11. We take volunteers. We create a daily crew. So we're looking for people for this upcoming season who might want to do, say, 4 weeks in a row on Monday or 4 weeks in a row on Tuesday. So we're looking for a regular crew. We also on Sunday, that's when we can take general volunteers to work in the fields. And that's limited to 10 people at a time right now, which is a big bummer, and hopefully will change. Because we used to have 30 to 50 people a Sunday come out, and we program with our volunteers. We don't just set people out in the field. Our farm manager will talk about whatever's growing or whatever the task is, and there's a bit of education and socializing that happens along too. And if it's a harvest day, volunteers get to get to help harvest the food and package it up and help get it to the food pantries and see. So you get to see that connection. But Grow Local could use volunteers all the time. They have 20 gardens around town, including the governor's mansion. They need help all the time. And aside from that, each of the Denver urban run gardens is its own thing. And the thing about community gardens is it's hard to grow food. It's hard, especially in the summer, because you have to water everything continuously because it gets so hot. People that start out as a gardener don't necessarily stick with it for themselves. So it's good to get your feet wet with some of these other organizations. So Grow Local. I also love Jeffco Eats. They're not really running gardens, but Barb Moore is doing a great job and always needs help. And I would say Revision in Westwood also could use volunteers. They run a number of community gardens.
You know, we work with Jeff Coates. We're,
Great.
we're a storage facility for them.
Love that. Do you guys have a, do you guys have more storage available?
Yes,
All right.
absolutely. You
You're,
should call
okay.
me.
All right. Okay.
We've been really fortunate. Our feeding ministry has, we have this big old, probably 120 people or so, what we call parish hall. And right now it's just full of food. I mean,
Great.
we can't meet in there, so it's just full of food. And so anyway, Barbara Moore stored stuff in our basement. We've got a huge basement. So yeah, we've got space. If we could turn our building at least for now into a huge food operation and fill every corner of it with food to give away, we would absolutely do that. So
That's great to know.
you should be in touch. So I've had a couple of people, we know a couple of people are still interested in seeds and seed distribution and seed growth.
Yes.
And tell us more about that.
So, so there's 3 times a year to plant here in Colorado. There's the early season, which is things that can't take the heat. So, you plant those things in the spring, and then you plant them again in the fall. Radishes, lettuces, things like that, peas. So we have all those things that we are bundling. We're creating seed bundles for people that want to grow those, and we'll have those ready for distribution pretty soon. Maybe by the second week of February, people should start all those things in your house, and then plant them out after Mother's Day. And then there's the hot season things, the tomatoes, eggplants, peppers. All of those things take a little longer, and those all should be started. Those seeds should all be started pretty soon indoors as well. But we're growing all of the growing organizations are growing a lot of seedlings for distribution as well. But if any of you want any seeds, just give us a holler. We have so many, and there's delicious things. There's so many delicious things.
So people could use these seeds to grow tomatoes at home, or have a little lettuce pot, or
Yes, in fact, we're working with a couple of senior centers who are trying to make lettuce pots for, because they don't have any space. They've got to do it on their patios, or even herbs indoors. So yeah, whatever your situation is, there's something you can grow and eat for sure. And we have a person on our staff that goes and does free consults. So if you don't know if your space is good and what you should do with it, she'll let you know.
well, I know Michelle put ekarfarm.org in our chat, but I went through your website and it's really informative, and it is transformative. It appears it's a cool organization. So we're really glad to have you kick off this time when we're talking about food justice, food insecurity, food sovereignty as well. So thank you so much for being here. It's really been a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone on this call for participating in conversations like this. It's really important.
So thank you to Sue. Yes. And our next Thurman conversation is the 28th of January. We'll continue, as I said, with food justice and systemic change. Our guest will be Elizabeth DeRuff. Elizabeth is an agricultural chaplain with the Episcopal Church in California. She's a businesswoman and a farmer who makes a home in Marin County. She is a pioneer in exploring the intersection of food, land, and faith. In this capacity, she conducts research, writes, teaches, preaches, and consults with congregations around the country. Elizabeth grows and sources 2 varieties of heirloom wheat, which are stone milled and available for sale from Honore Farm and Mill. She also directs CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, that provides flour to churches. Her research and recipes are available online at honoremill.org. Sue, thank you so much for being with us. Y'all, this is the conversation series this conversation series is sponsored by the Race Task Force of the Episcopal Church in Colorado and St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Lakewood. How can we find you, Sue?
How can you find me? Sue at ekarfarm.org.
Sue at ekarfarm.org. As always, I want to thank our producer, Michelle Auerbach, for all her hard work. And as always, if you like what you hear here on the Thurman Conversations, don't tell us, tell your friends. Stay safe, all of you. Love your neighbor and wear a mask. Good night, everybody.